How could I have comprehended that moment would utterly alter my existence? It was merely a typical day until I stepped into that chamber. When I discerned the door was slightly ajar, something within me shifted. In mere seconds, I could have retreated, disregarded it, but I didn't. 'Cause in that instant, when I grasped what I was observing, I knew nothing would ever be quite the same. And yes, I was indeed culpable here, for I initiated it and failed to halt it. George was at his workplace. The residence was serene, yet I detected faint sounds emanating from upstairs. Elliot was in his private space. Initially, I didn't ponder it much, just another instance of a young man engrossed in his own realm. But perhaps he'd appreciate a coffee, a brief dialogue might be pleasant. As I ascended the staircase, I endeavored to ascertain the source of the sounds. Upon nearing his room, I noticed the door was slightly agape. I inhaled, poised to call out to him, but then my gaze landed on Elliot. He was seated on his bed, his laptop resting on his lap, the luminous screen casting a glow on his countenance. His hands were in motion, and at first I presumed he was simply watching something exhilarating, perhaps an action film. But as I took one more stride, altering my vantage point, I felt my vitality drain from my face. That was the juncture I precisely realized what Elliot was doing. My vision caught the reflection on the screen, and a chilling surge enveloped me. I hadn't anticipated this. I hadn't desired to behold this. Elliot scrambled, attempting to compose himself, frantically reducing the volume on his laptop, but it was too late. The moment had already unfolded. When our gazes intersected, his face turned crimson, the mortification in his eyes undeniable. I'm sorry," he stammered, averting his gaze. I felt paralyzed. The door," I began, but I had no notion what I was even striving to articulate. A peculiar warmth diffused through me. I was mortified, yes, but my intellect was also racing with thoughts I couldn't quite grasp. I swiftly exited the room, my heart throbbing against my chest. I pressed my hands to my face, attempting to regulate my breathing. What in the hell was that? I whispered to myself. What had I just done? Why had I been so heedless? But was I the sole one at fault here? Stop it, Darlene, I admonished myself sternly. But the turmoil within me was ignited by more than just what I had witnessed. Elliot was now 23. He wasn't a child any longer. But I was also 47, a woman who had experienced her fair share of mortification in life. I had never been in a predicament like this before, but I knew precisely what mortification felt like. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart still racing. I ran my fingers through my hair, striving to regain my composure. When Elliot appeared at the doorway, he adjusted the collar of his shirt, cleared his throat, and kept his eyes downcast. Darlene, I'm sorry. I thought I had closed the door, he stated, his voice uncertain but genuine. I quickly shook my head, looking away. No, actually I should be the one apologizing. I should have knocked before entering, I blurted, not truly knowing what else to utter. Silence. But this wasn't just any silence. We had resided in the same dwelling for years, but this was the inaugural occasion we had ever regarded each other like this, the inaugural occasion there was this sort of strain between us. I should head downstairs and commence preparing something for dinner, I swiftly declared, turning toward the stairs. My voice was quivering, but I was endeavoring to maintain my composure. Elliot said nothing. He simply tracked me with his eyes as if he was trying to deduce something in his mind. Before the truly significant events began to transpire between Elliot and me, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, activate notifications, and listen to this narrative until its conclusion. I pledge to you, everything is about to become truly exhilarating. Until that evening, we exchanged no words with each other, no texts, no eye contact, not even casual conversation. But that silence, it hinted that things would never again be the same. At dinner, we occupied the same table, but we couldn't look at one another. The only sound was the faint clinking of cutlery against our plates. We needed to communicate to alleviate the tension. We both recognized it, but how? That night passed, then the ensuing day, and the one after that. Everything appeared normal, but nothing truly was. Our silence merely amplified the invisible strain between us. And then, one afternoon, Elliot sat down beside me. I could perceive the hesitation in his eyes, but it was clear he desired to rectify matters. "Darlene, about the other day, I'm genuinely mortified. I'm sorry. I didn't want things to be this way. Please, I don't want this to ruin things between us," he expressed, his voice nervous but sincere. I took a profound breath. No matter how peculiar and unforeseen this was, I needed to put him at ease. I smiled, shrugged slightly, and remarked, "Oh, Elliot, believe me, I've had my fair share of embarrassing moments over the years." Then I recounted a few of those instances to him. His smile eased somewhat, and he nodded, his embarrassment subtly diminishing. That moment, it seemed as though the tension between us had dissipated, but deep down, I knew nothing had truly passed. Even though everything seemed to be improving, this conversation had utterly erased the boundaries between us, and I could sense it. Things were poised to escalate much, much further. Elliot let out a soft chuckle, lowering his gaze to the table. "I guess we're even now," he uttered quietly. I furrowed my brow slightly and turned to him. "What do you mean?" I inquired, curiosity creeping into my voice. For a second, his expression shifted, as if he had just realized he had disclosed something he couldn't retract. He rubbed the back of his neck, hesitating for a moment, but he had already commenced, and now he had no recourse but to proceed. He took a profound breath, then looked away as he mumbled, "I've seen you." The same way you just didn't know about it. Felt like electricity had coursed through my body. I froze for a moment. "What?" I whispered as the weight of his words pressed down on me. Elliot's face was flushed, but he continued, "I never told you because I was too embarrassed, but I never forgot about it. Actually, it was my little secret, something I couldn't expunge from my mind." My heart was thumping wildly. A strange warmth diffused through me, that unfamiliar sensation that indicated something had transformed. Elliot's words weren't merely a confession. They shattered every remaining boundary between us. I looked at him. He was looking at me too, and by now we both knew this wasn't just a commonplace conversation. The atmosphere in the room had grown dense. Everything had shifted. From that day onward, everything altered. There had always been a separation between us before, that imperceptible barrier that kept us apart. But now it felt as though that barrier had utterly vanished. Without even realizing it, I had started dedicating so much more time with Elliot. Minor instances, seemingly trivial conversations, but in reality, each one merely intensified the strain between us. Now we even sat and viewed motion pictures together. Previously, we would consistently maintain our distance, but now there was an unspoken magnetism between us, something we both perceived but never acknowledged. Sometimes, when Elliot rested his arm on the couch, when my hand brushed against his leg, or when our laughter intertwined, I felt something peculiar within me, but I tried not to dwell on it. One night, I couldn't find sleep. I kept tossing and turning in bed, but the restlessness within me wouldn't subside. Perhaps there was only one thought occupying my mind: Elliot. This couldn't persist. I needed to establish a boundary. If he harbored feelings for me, I had to articulate it explicitly and put an end to it. With that thought, I arose from bed. My heart was pounding frantically, but my feet had already guided me to Elliot's room. His door was slightly ajar, and the faint illumination within faintly lit the chamber. As I stepped inside, I saw him. He was slumbering, but at that moment my gaze wasn't on him. It was fixed on something else, something substantial. My breath caught, my body froze for a moment. Seeing him like that ignited a tempest within me. I shouldn't have seen it. I should have immediately turned back. But I didn't. I stood there for a few seconds, striving to comprehend what I was experiencing. Then I swiftly retreated. There was something within me that I couldn't suppress, but I had to disregard it. I returned to my room, lay down, but nothing was the same anymore. That night, I had no inkling how much more intricate things would become. No matter what I did, I couldn't resist this burgeoning intimacy with Elliot. With each passing day, the boundaries blurred even further, and the magnetic pull between us only intensified. I didn't even grasp when things had progressed this far, but the one truth I knew was that retreating was becoming impossible. And then Elliot arrived home in that state. He was intoxicated. The noise from the door, the objects he knocked over, the sounds could have roused George, but I knew how difficult it was for George to awaken, so I swiftly exited my room and went to Elliot. I didn't even have time to properly adjust my attire before I was standing right beside him. Elliot's eyes were slightly unfocused, and a faint smile played on his lips. "Darlene, are you real?" he mumbled, his words slurred from the alcohol but still heartfelt. I took a deep breath and grasped his arm. "Elliot, come on, you can't go upstairs like this. We have to be quiet." But Elliot's eyes were fixated on my face. He smiled softly, his gaze slowly traveling over me. "You know, you're really beautiful. Have you always been this way, or did I just never notice?" I froze for a second, but then quickly composed myself. "Elliot, that's enough. Come to the kitchen. I'll make you some coffee." I slowly guided him to the kitchen. I was trying to help him sober up a little, but because of Elliot's gaze and the things he was saying, something inside me was also unraveling. Elliot sat down on the chair while I prepared the coffee, but suddenly the cup slipped from his hands and spilled onto the counter. "Ah, Elliot, you need to be more careful," I whispered, quickly attempting to clean up the mess. But Elliot just smiled softly. "Were you always this sweet?" I hurriedly cleaned up the kitchen. We couldn't remain here any longer. George was slumbering upstairs, but with Elliot in this condition, he couldn't afford to generate any more commotion. "All right, we're going upstairs." "But be quiet," I warned, slipping my arm around his and guiding him toward the stairs. When we reached his room, his movements were even more unsteady. He needed to change his attire, but he was too disoriented to do it on his own. First, I intended to turn around, but when I saw him struggling to remove his shirt, I instinctively aided him. As my fingers reached for the buttons of his shirt, Elliot's breathing slowed. At that moment, the tension between us filled the air. The silence only intensified it. I knew precisely what I was doing, yet simultaneously I had no idea. Elliot was looking at me differently, and this was one of those moments, one of the moments we could never retract. Elliot hesitated while changing his clothes. He let his hands fall to his sides and locked eyes with me. That was when I realized my breathing had quickened. It was so quiet. The air in the room felt heavy, making it difficult to even respire. "I'm not playing this game anymore, Darlene," he stated, his voice soft at first but filled with certainty. I stared at him without blinking, my heart was pounding. But what was Elliot trying to convey? "Are you?" he added, his voice deepening slightly. "We both caught each other once, and that's it. You don't contemplate it at all? I know it crosses your mind before you sleep." A shiver ran through me, causing me to take a small step back, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. "Elliot, this isn't right," I uttered, but my voice trembled. Elliot smiled slightly, but it wasn't an innocent smile. "We passed the point of deciding what's right a long time ago, Darlene. Stop deceiving yourself." Then he took a step forward and another. He was so close now that I could feel his breath against my skin. He reached up, his fingers trailing gently over my cheek. I desired to look away, but I couldn't because deep down I knew he was correct. And then Elliot's lips met mine. All the silence, all the tension, the answer to everything was concealed in that moment. The thoughts reverberating in my mind suddenly subsided, all my uncertainties fading into whispers because I hadn't resisted Elliot, and the truth was I had never desired to. My hands were trembling, but I didn't recoil. When I saw the resolve in Elliot's eyes, I knew there was nothing left to conceal. I swallowed, took a profound breath, and slowly slid the straps of my garment off my shoulders. "You're right, Elliot," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Let's not play this game any longer." Closing the distance between us completely, I reclined on the bed. My heart was pounding in my chest, but turning back was no longer an option. Elliot slowly leaned over me. He looked into my eyes for a moment, then smiled. "Don't be afraid," he stated, his voice warm and reassuring. "Everything is correct." I looked away, a shiver coursing through me. Even if I couldn't admit it to myself, I knew how long I had been anticipating this moment. But still, I couldn't stop the words from escaping my lips. "Elliot, I'm a little scared," I uttered, my breathing uneven because of a few significant things. Elliot smiled and disregarded what I said, as if he found it agreeable. Perhaps it was due to his intoxication. Elliot quietly leaned to my ear and whispered, "George mustn't awaken." I understood what he meant. There had to be silence. I don't know how I felt, something immense within me, and I had to restrain myself from emitting a loud sound. Elliot looked at me and said something like, "I know, Darlene, everything is great, and so are you." What did he know? I believe he surmised and comprehended me. I couldn't help myself, and I closed my eyes. I was clutching the sheets tightly with my hands, and my body trembled and spasmed. I covered my mouth with my hands so I wouldn't make a sound. Elliot was so inebriated that he didn't care about anything. In fact, even this was profoundly affecting me. The exhilaration of the event combined with everything else and the irresistible sensation of something momentous. Elliot was drunk, fatigued, and breathless. I said, "Elliot, you're flushed and we have to hasten." Elliot replied, "Okay." He repeated, "Okay," but he persisted in the same manner more and more. I experienced another contraction, and I ceased caring about anything anymore. I wasn't even myself anymore. I closed my eyes and declared, "Whatever you desire, Elliot, whatever you desire." Elliot must have approved because he completely released himself. He let go entirely, and that was too much. The heat within me was too much. I swiftly laid Elliot down in his bed and covered him. Then I locked his bedroom door. I wished to take a tranquil shower and completely relax. I had no notion what was going to happen next, what had just transpired. I reflected on it in the shower, but simultaneously I felt apprehensive, uneasy. And yet, by the time I stepped out, my mind felt clearer. Oddly enough, I actually felt composed. I couldn't even be upset with myself because my body felt just as relaxed as my mind. I dressed in silence, walked to my bed, and went to sleep as if nothing had occurred. But the truth is, this was merely a moment of excitement, a surge of imprudent desire. But nothing was ever that straightforward, and this wasn't going to remain straightforward either. It didn't conclude here, it couldn't. More significant events transpired, more intense things, and in the end, George was going to discover everything. This narrative isn't over yet. Be sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Turn on notifications and leave a comment. It helps you stay one step ahead for these stories. Your support means everything, and if you've made it this far, thank you for listening.